Hey guys, this is Megan with Left in Knots, and today I'm going to show you how to make your own reusable water balloons using loop yarn and finger knitting. This is a spin-off of my popular crocheted water balloon pattern that I published back in 2016. These have been one of my most popular patterns on the blog, and I love them. They are so fun for playing outside, wet, like you would with a water balloon, or inside as like a bath toy or just a dry water balloon fight inside. It's a really great way to keep kids busy indoors, and adults seriously love them too. So this is the original crochet pattern. I'll have that linked in the video description below. But if you're looking for a different way to make them, you can also make it with this new loop yarn that has gotten popular over the past couple years. The look is a little bit different, but you still get the same basic shape and they work the same way. It's still that fluffy chenille polyester yarn that's really absorbent, but stays lightweight. So it soaks up a lot of water and they're really good for throwing. As always, I advise using the same caution you would take with normal water balloons, not throwing at the face and head, making sure that they're clean so you're not getting debris anywhere on the body that it shouldn't be. I'll post all of those comments down in the video description below as well. But overall, these are such a fun summer toy. They can be fun in the winter, like I said, dry in the house. They're just great, and they're super lightweight. They don't knock things over when they're dry. So I'm going to show you how to use the loop yarn to make these water balloons today. Now I used Crayola off the hook yarn from Lion brand because it comes in these really fun bright colors. There's this multicolor, and then they've got pretty much every color of the rainbow except orange. As of the time I'm filming this, I don't know why. So they have all the colors of the rainbow except for orange, solid orange. I believe Red Heart also makes a chenille loop yarn. I think it's called Loop It. And then there are a couple other loop yarns that aren't the same feel. This yarn feels exactly like burlap blanket yarn, if you're familiar with that. So if you're looking at a loop yarn that isn't this polyester chenille type yarn, it may not work the same way for water balloons. So just make sure you're getting this. It, I believe, is 100% polyester. Yep. And like I said, these are Crayola off the hook from Lion brand to get those fun bright colors. So to start, you're going to find the end of your yarn and you're going to count 1, 2 loops and start with your third loop. And now what you're going to do is you're basically going to make your starting chain row like you would in a crochet pattern. That's what it looks like to me at any rate. But you're finger knitting with these loops. So you take this third loop and you take the fourth loop and you just push the fourth loop up through your third loop. Now you're at your fifth loop and your fourth loop. You're going to push the fifth loop up through your fourth loop. And you're going to continue doing that. So here's, I'll call this my first stitch. Ignore these loops because we're saving those for later. This is my first stitch. This is my second stitch. We want 8. So this will be number 3. Number 4. 5. 6. 7. And 8. So again, if we count those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 stitches. It looks like the chain row in a crochet pattern. Now we're going to make it into a circular piece by wrapping it around in a circle, keeping this working loop over here, leaving these 2 loose loops dangling that we're going to use to close the top of the water balloon. And then like you would in the row in the chain row of a crochet pattern, you're going to just work into, I've just been working into one loop from these stitches in the chain row. So that's number 1 to connect it as a circle. Now this is where you can opt to use a stitch marker if you have trouble keeping track of the first loop of your round. So it's kind of bulky, I'll spread it out there so you can see a little bit better. So this is my first loop of the round here. If I wanted to keep track of that, or if I thought I'd have trouble keeping track of that, I could put a stitch marker on there and then just move it each time you go around in your circle. I've made several of these now, so I don't feel that I need one. So that's 1. Now you grab your next loop, and that's 2. Next loop, 3. Your next loop is 4. Your next loop is 5. 6. 7. And 8. And now I'm back at the beginning of my round. So that is round 1. This is the working yarn. Again, these are my loops that I'm going to use to tie off the top of the water balloon. To make things a little bit easier to look at, I like to cut those open. And so this yarn is made into loops by these strings that connect them here. So you can actually spread this apart, and you might not always see the string, but as long as you get those 2 ends apart, take a small thread scissors and just cut right in between the ends of that loop. You cut that string, but not the yarn. So now you have a regular tail of yarn on the end of your project. So now, this is where I was at. That's round 1. Now round 2 is going to look the same. I'm going to always going to take the next loop from my working yarn and push it up through the loop from my previous round. So that's 1. And I'm always, so here's my previous round, here's my working yarn. I'm always pushing that up through so that you get that knit look on the outside. If you did it the other way, if you pushed it down, it almost makes like a, I don't know, I'm not a knitter, but it almost makes a stitch that almost looks like a purl to me. That might be really wrong. I'm not sure. So push it up through the loop. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so that's the end of round 2. Again, I just pulled 1 loop through each of the previous loops, and I'm still at 8 stitches in the round. I'm going to do 2 more rounds of this, and then I'm going to show you how to shape the bottom of the water balloon. So right now would be a good time to pause, work 2 more rounds of these loop stitches around, 8 stitches in each round, and then come back and I will show you the rest of the water balloon. Okay, I'm back. Here you can see we've got the top part of the water balloon done. Again, this is the chain row plus 4 rounds of the finger knitting around in a circle. And this is where you have a choice to make. I tried 2 different sizes. This larger balloon here has 5 rounds of the 8 stitches. This smaller balloon here stops at 4 rounds. This balloon is closer to the size of my original water balloon pattern. This balloon, I think I like the look of just a little bit better. And it's good for small hands too. So I kind of prefer this smaller size, but if you want to go with something bigger, if you're making these for adults or you just want bigger water balloons, go for it. I mean, you can't really do this wrong. But I'm going to show you 4 rounds here. So I've got 4 rounds. Now I'm going to do a round of decreasing, which is really easy. You take your next working loop, put it through the first stitch like you normally would, and then for this second stitch of your previous round, instead of grabbing a new loop, you just take this loop that you already worked with and put it through one more stitch. So basically you're putting one working loop through 2 stitches at a time. So that's 1. So I'm going to go through the next one. That's 2. That's 3. And sometimes it's easy to miss your next loop, so make sure you're grabbing the right loop. And that is 4. So your 8 stitches just became 4 stitches around. And now you're almost done. Now your very last round is just going to be closing the water balloon up. This is the stitch you just left off on. You're going to take this loop and loop it through each of the remaining loops in that round. So you're just pushing it through each one of those loops from the previous round. And now you're just left with one little loop here. There. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 loops and then cut that off there. And then like I did at the beginning, I'm going to cut these loops open so that it just becomes one long piece of yarn. And again, as long as you're pulling those apart and you have a nice small thread scissors, it cuts really easily. So there, I cut my loops apart. Now I have this yarn and I'm going to tie it off with this loop. And that looks a little bit funny, but again, these are just water balloons, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to push the yarn through that loop to make another loop there. I'm going to just pull that tight but slowly. If you pull this yarn too quickly, and I know this from experience, you will tear it. If I just tugged this really hard, the yarn would break. So tighten carefully. Then I'm going to do my finishing. I did try using a yarn needle with this project. I didn't prefer it. I just prefer using my fingers. If you have a yarn needle that you like to use for bulky yarns, by all means go for it. I just found it easier to use my fingers for making the ends disappear. So this tail I'm going to tuck into the balloon and then reach through the top and pull. So this is the bottom part of my balloon that we just made here. Now I'm going to leave some of this tail here because, so I'm going to leave maybe about 1 inch still connected, snip the rest off, and now I'm going to use the rest of this yarn to tie the bottom of the water balloon. And since I left that little tail of yarn, this is going to tighten around that tail of yarn too and keep it in place. because there aren't very many good spaces to weave ends in with this loop yarn, I noticed. So I'm just going to tie this around it instead, and that'll keep it nice and snug in place. And then again, I'm just going to tuck these ends into the inside of the water balloon. No worries, it'll just make it absorb more water and be splashier. And then finally, we're going to close up the top. If you notice little white threads, that's the string that's in the center of all this polyester fluff. If you have any of those sticking out like I do here, you can just snip them off. Okay, so now I've got this other tail that I started with, and I'm just going to use my fingers again to push that back and forth between the stitches in the top of the water balloon, weaving in and out. And then again, pull so carefully, because if you pull too hard, this yarn will snap. Okay, so I'm all the way through. I'm going to pull slowly. And now I'm going to just find a loop down here and knot it like I did before. Just make a loop. Push your tail through the loop and carefully pull tight. And now we're just going to make that tail disappear to the inside of the water balloon also. And you've got your cute little finished reusable water balloon. Here you can see it side by side with my crocheted water balloon. It's more easy to compare the two when they're both a solid color, I think. So again, I just did 4 rounds of this one. It's a little bit shorter, but it's about the same shape. So I don't know, I think I like this shape better than the longer shape of 5 rounds, but you make your own decisions. I can get about 6 or 7 of these out of one skein of this loop yarn, depending on, you know, they measure it by weight, so there's always some small variations. But I'd say you could most of the time get 7 water balloons out of one skein of this loop yarn, the Crayola Off the Hook by Lion Brand. And now, since I get so many questions, if you're just here for the tutorial, that's it. That's the whole tutorial. You go make a bunch of these, play with them at your homes, and you're gonna have a blast, I promise. I haven't had a single person tell me they didn't have fun with those. So now if you want to see how these work, I have my, can you see it? My Be a Nice Human mug here with one of my water balloons soaking in it. And this is all you have to do with them. I get this question all the time. How do you fill it with water? You don't. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to fill it with water. You just soak it like a sponge. And this yarn is so absorbent, like, it's going to be hard to get on the camera, but you can hear how much water I'm squeezing off of that. And this is one of the larger water balloons. This was one with 5 rounds. But yeah, you just dunk it. It soaks up the water, and then you're ready to throw these around outside. Super simple. Cleanup is way easier than with regular water balloons. You don't have little bits and pieces of plastic. You don't have to pre-fill them ahead of time. They always splash. They never bounce off of who you're throwing them at without breaking. I always remember being disappointed when that happened as a child. So they're just a lot of fun. I'll show you with this new one too. There's no tricks or anything. This is a brand new one. Just soak it in the water. Comes out wet. And then you can squeeze it right out. And there's your water balloon. When you're done playing with these, you can pop them in the washing machine and either let them air dry or stick them in the dryer. I wouldn't use fabric softener on them because that can ruin some absorbency. Or you can just let them air dry in the sun. Like I said, I designed the crocheted water balloons back in 2016, and we usually just keep them outside for a few times, and then I'll take them in and wash them a few times a summer. And then I usually just make a new set for the next summer. So you have a lot of options with these. Like I said, there's a crochet version, there's this finger knit version. Whichever you want to give a try, I just highly recommend these. They're great for the environment, they're great for people with latex allergies, and they're just great fun for kids. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I have a lot of other crochet patterns free on my blog, as well as video tutorials to support them. You can find them at www.leftinknots.com. And I will also link my water balloon patterns in the video description below so that you can get to those. And I will link some of my social media, so if you want to follow me for more of my patterns coming up, I always publish new patterns all year long. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.